The Billionaire in Room 808 Part 4. Chapter 11 The Train Incident. The journey into the Alps began like a scene from an old film. A luxury sleeper train, gleaming black lacquer and gold trim, waiting on a private platform in Milan. Uniformed attendants with white gloves carried their bags aboard. The scent of polished wood and leather filled the air. Everything was immaculate, restrained opulence, cured nostalgia. Layla had never seen anything like it. The suite reserved for them wasn't simply a compartment. It was an apartment on rails, a lounge with velvet armchairs, a private dining table set for two, a marble-tiled washroom, and a bedroom paneled in dark cherry wood with silk sheets that seemed to hum under her fingertips. A bottle of chilled champagne waited in an ice bucket. "Do you travel like this often?" she asked, watching Luca remove his jacket with the ease of someone who owned the world. "Only when I can't avoid it," he said. She frowned. "This feels like the kind of thing people dream of." He poured the champagne. Handed her a glass. His expression didn't shift. "Dreams are dangerous," he said. The train began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. The rhythm of the tracks softened into background music. Layla stood at the wide window, staring out as the Italian countryside blurred into twilight. Vineyards gave way to rolling hills, then to mountains crowned in snow. It was breathtaking. She let herself pretend, for a while, that this was all it was, a journey with someone who intrigued her, who offered her experiences no one else could. She let herself drink the champagne, stretch out on the velvet sofa, and imagine she wasn't here to uncover anything at all. But Luca never pretended. He worked in silence, reviewing a folder of documents he hadn't explained, making short calls in a language she couldn't place, his voice too low for her to catch. Even here, in perfection, he was on guard. Night fell. They dined in the suite, silver-domed plates, candlelight swaying gently with the train's movement. Layla felt lulled by the rhythm, by the richness of the food, by the subtle exhaustion that came from being around him. By midnight, she had slipped into the silk bed, her body tired, her mind restless. Sleep came in waves. And then, a sound. It was faint, but sharp enough to pull her from half-dream. A click. A shift of metal against metal. Layla sat up. The room was dark, moonlight spilling through the window, shadows swaying with the train's motion. The sound came again, at the door. Her breath caught. Before she could move, Luca was already standing. She hadn't even heard him rise, but there he was, calm, alert, barefoot on the carpet, moving like water. The lock gave way. The door opened. A figure slipped inside, tall, hooded, a silhouette against the faint hall light. Everything that happened next was silent. The figure lunged forward, fast, practiced, certain. Luca met him halfway. No hesitation. No wasted motion. Layla pressed herself back against the headboard, her heart hammering. The struggle was a blur, but not chaotic, it was precise, like watching a dance choreographed 1,000 times. A shove. A twist. The dull thud of a shoulder against wood. The intruder tried to reach into his coat. Luca stopped him with one swift move, catching his wrist, forcing it upward until something clattered to the floor and slid under the bed. The fight lasted seconds, though it felt endless. And then, a final motion. The door slid open again. And with one clean, controlled movement, Luca drove the man backward out into the hall, then further, toward the next door. A muffled scuffle. A grunt. And silence. When Luca returned, he was alone. Layla sat frozen, the sheets gathered in her fists. Her voice broke the silence. What just happened? Luca adjusted the cuffs of his shirt as if nothing unusual had occurred. His chest rose and fell, but his face was steady. Composed. Nothing you need to lose sleep over. Her eyes widened. Someone broke into the suite. And they won't again. That was all he said. No explanation. No panic. Just control. Layla stared at him, unable to decide what terrified her more. That someone had come for him. Or that he'd handled it without a flicker of fear. Because in that moment, she understood something she had only half believed before. Luca didn't live in her world. He lived in a world where danger was routine. Where men came in the night. Where control wasn't a choice, it was survival. And he had just shown her how easily he could survive. She lay awake long after he returned to bed. The train rocked gently through the night, carrying them deeper into the Alps. The mountains loomed outside, cold and eternal. Inside, Luca slept like a man untroubled. Layla did not. Because now she knew, she wasn't traveling with a mysterious billionaire. She was traveling with a man who had enemies. And they had just found him. Chapter 12 Behind the Mask. The train cut through the Alps like a needle threading silence. Snowfields stretched on forever outside the wide glass windows, blinding in the morning sun. The mountains loomed like ancient gods, jagged and patient, carved from ice and time. Inside the suite, everything was still. Layla sat curled on the velvet sofa, her knees drawn close, watching the world blur past. She hadn't slept. The adrenaline from the night before still hummed in her blood like a secret rhythm. She'd replayed it again and again, the lock clicking open, the shadow entering, Luca's sudden movement, his effortless control. He hadn't explained. He hadn't even looked shaken. But Layla was. Because she had seen, in that moment, the truth she had been chasing. Luca Moretti wasn't a ghost. He was very much alive. And he belonged to something bigger than any blog post or encrypted message could capture. Now, in the daylight, she wanted answers. And she wasn't going to let him deflect this time. He sat across from her at the small dining table, his back straight, sleeves rolled to the elbow, hands resting on the polished wood. The morning sun lit one side of his face, leaving the other in shadow. He looked less like a man at breakfast and more like a portrait painted to last centuries. Layla broke the silence first. You owe me an explanation. He glanced at her, eyes unreadable. For what? For last night. You saw what happened. I saw someone break into our suite. Her voice was sharper than she intended. And I saw you deal with it like it wasn't the first time. Like it happens all the time. A pause. Luca leaned back in his chair, exhaled through his nose, and looked out the window at the endless white beyond. You're not wrong. Layla's heart skipped. He turned back to her, his gaze steady. You want the truth? Yes. Then I'll tell you part of it. He rose and walked to the window, his reflection stretching across the glass, a dark silhouette against the blinding snow. I was born into a family with, he began. His voice was calm, stripped of embellishment, as if he had rehearsed this 1,000 times in his head and never once aloud. A name that opened doors. That closed others. A name that commanded loyalty and obedience in places where law had no meaning. Layla felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Your family, she said softly. Yes. His lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. The Morettis. You've heard it before, I'm sure. Whispers. Rumors. Old headlines buried under more polite news. Layla didn't answer. She didn't need to. She had read those whispers, chased those rumors. She had followed that name across continents until it brought her here. He continued. When I was young, I thought the family legacy was strength. Power. That's what they wanted me to believe. But power comes with chains. And every chain tightens until you can't breathe. He paused, watching the mountains glide by. So I left. Or I tried to. Layla leaned forward, her fingers tightening around the edge of the sofa. Tried. There are no clean exits, Luca said simply. Not from something that old. That deep. You can step away from the table, but the game doesn't stop. It waits. And sooner or later, someone drags you back to play. Layla's throat tightened. And that's what's happening now. He met her gaze. His eyes were calm, but she could see the weight behind them, the weight of years, of choices, of shadows that refused to let him go. Yes, he said quietly. Someone wants me back. Or gone. Maybe both. Her pulse quickened. Why you? Luca's mouth curved, bitter this time. Because I didn't follow the script. Because I refused to become what they wanted. And because some people can't stand a man who holds the secrets they'd rather keep buried. Layla swallowed hard. The dossier room. The maps. The faces. Her own photograph pinned to the wall. Everything clicked into place. You've been running from them, she whispered. No, Luca corrected softly. He stepped closer, lowering his voice until it was almost intimate. I've been waiting. There's a difference. Layla felt her breath catch. Waiting. Not escaping. Not hiding. He was biding his time, calculating, controlling, the way he always did. But for what? Why tell me this now, she asked, her voice quiet. Luca studied her for a long moment. Because you've already seen behind the mask. Because you won't stop asking. And because part of me, he trailed off, then shook his head. Part of me wants you to understand before you decide whether to walk away. Layla held his gaze. I'm not walking away. The silence stretched between them, thick as velvet. Finally, he inclined his head, just slightly. Then you'll need to know more. But not today. The train shuddered slightly as it rounded a bend, the mountains pressing in closer, snow drifting like feathers outside. Layla looked out the window, her heart racing. She had wanted the truth. And she had gotten a piece of it. But not all. Not yet. And if Luca was right, if someone was truly trying to pull him back into that world, then she wasn't just chasing a story anymore. She was sitting inside it. And it was still being written. Chapter 13, The Hidden Recorder. The day had been ordinary, almost suspiciously so. They had arrived in Zurich. Checked into a discreet penthouse that wasn't listed on any hotel's website. A chef had delivered their dinner in silence. A bottle of wine had been uncorked and left breathing on the terrace. Luca had seemed calmer than usual, though calm with him was always relative, less like serenity and more like the eye of a storm. He had disappeared into his study after dinner, leaving Layla in the living room with the skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was almost enough to let her believe, for one night, that they were just two people sharing a bottle of wine in a beautiful place. almost. She hadn't noticed when he came back. Not until his shadow fell across the room. Layla turned, smiling faintly, but the smile froze. In his hand, held lightly between two fingers, was her recorder. The small, silver device she had hidden at the bottom of her travel bag, beneath scarves and notebooks and a camera lens she hadn't used in months. Her throat closed. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, the recorder dangling like a pendulum. His face was unreadable, carved in restraint. When he finally did speak, his voice was low. Even. Too even. You lied. Layla's pulse thundered in her ears. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I can explain. Explain what? His tone never shifted. That you came here under false pretenses. That you weren't simply writing about luxury villas and sunsets. Her chest tightened. It wasn't like that. No. He stepped closer, placing the recorder on the table between them with delicate precision. Then what was it like? Layla stared at it. The device suddenly looked obscene in its smallness, its banality. A few ounces of plastic and metal that could unravel everything. Her eyes burned. I needed the truth, she whispered. His expression didn't change. I didn't come to spy, she said, her voice cracking now. I came because someone told me you were alive. Because I had nothing left. Because this was the only lead I had to rebuild my life. Her breath hitched. She forced herself to meet his eyes. But I stayed, because of you. The silence was unbearable. She had expected fury. Accusations. A demand to leave. Instead, Luca simply looked at her. Not with anger. Not even disappointment. Something worse. Something colder. He was shaken, she could see it in the slight tension at his jaw, the faint shadow of something breaking behind his eyes, but he contained it, like he contained everything. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than before. You should have trusted me. Layla swallowed, tears burning at the edge of her lashes. And you should have told me who you really are. Another silence. For a moment, she thought he might answer. That he might break the wall he always kept between them. But instead, he turned. Walked to the door. And left. The click of the door closing echoed louder than any shout. Layla sat alone in the silence, staring at the recorder on the table. Her reflection glinted faintly in its small, dark screen. For the first time since arriving in Capri, she felt not like a player in his world, but like a trespasser. And she wondered if he would let her stay much longer. Chapter 14 The Message. The morning felt deceptively ordinary. Capri's air was all blue salt and jasmine, the villa bathed in soft sunlight that filtered through glass walls and warmed the marble floors. Layla stood barefoot in the kitchen, waiting for the espresso machine to hum to life, letting herself pretend for a moment that this was normal, that she lived here, that this was her kitchen, that the man upstairs was just another lover and not, whatever he was. Her phone buzzed with scheduled reminders she ignored. Post-travel draft. Send invoice. Call editor. Tasks from another life. She was still staring at the blank espresso cup when the doorbell rang. A sound too sharp, too formal, too foreign in the stillness of the villa. She froze. Visitors weren't part of this world. Not unannounced. Not here. Luca appeared seconds later, silent, fast, his presence filling the space as if he had materialized from the shadows themselves. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his expression unreadable. "Stay here," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. Layla nodded, her fingers tightening around the counter edge. Luca walked to the door, pressed a button on the discreet black panel beside it. The screen flickered with a camera view of the entry. A box sat on the steps. No courier. No car. Just the box. Perfectly square, wrapped in plain brown paper, tied with black twine. He opened the door anyway. Brought it inside. Placed it on the table with deliberate calm. Neither spoke. Layla's stomach twisted as Luca untied the twine, unwrapped the paper, and lifted the lid. Inside was no gift. Just a photograph. Layla's breath caught. It was her. The photo had been taken that morning. She was standing outside the villa, barefoot on the terrace, coffee cup in hand, her hair pulled into a careless knot. From the angle, it had been shot from the cliffs below, looking up, sharp, clear, unshakably real. Someone had been close. Close enough to see her. Close enough to frame her like prey. She reached for it with trembling fingers. "That's..." "I know," Luca cut in, his voice flat but his eyes burning. There was more. Pinned to the corner of the photo with a silver paper clip was a small ivory card. Elegant script. No smudges. No fingerprints. She read it aloud, her voice low, unsteady. "You've made powerful friends. But not all of them want you to stay." The room fell silent. Layla stared at the photo, then at Luca. Her chest tightened. They were here. Yes. Watching. Yes. Her voice broke. Watching me. Luca took the photo from her hand, his fingers brushing hers only briefly. He studied it without emotion, though his jaw clenched faintly, the only betrayal of anger beneath his control. "This isn't random," he said. "They want you to know they see you. That you're vulnerable. That I can't protect you." Layla's throat closed. "And can you?" she whispered. His eyes lifted to hers. Dark. Steady. "I can." A pause. "But they want you to doubt it." She sank into the chair, clutching the edge of the table. It wasn't about him anymore. Not just about Luca's past, his family, his shadows. It was about her. Whoever had left this box had shifted the game, pulled her from bystander to target. And she couldn't shake the chill that someone, right now, might still be out there. Waiting. Watching. Luca placed the photo back into the box and closed the lid. His movements were slow, deliberate. Then he looked at her, his voice low. "Listen to me carefully, Layla. From this moment forward, nothing you do goes unnoticed. Every step, every word, every glance. They've chosen to involve you. That means you are now inside this." Her heart thudded. Inside what? "The war I tried to leave behind." He reached for her hand, not tenderly, but firmly, grounding her. "You wanted the truth. Now you're living it. And from now on, you don't walk alone. Not here. Not anywhere." Layla stared at him, the weight of the photograph pressing into her mind. A warning disguised as a gift. Proof that she had crossed a line she couldn't step back from. And in that moment, she understood something with crystalline clarity. Her story was no longer about Luca. Her story was about both of them. Because now she was part of his shadows. And the shadows had seen her. Chapter 15 Ambush in Venice. Venice looked like a dream when they arrived. All water and reflection. palaces and shadows. Layla leaned against the window of the water taxi, the wind playing with her hair, as the city unfolded, endless bridges, marble facades, lanterns glowing on narrow balconies. She had seen photographs, films, paintings, but none of it prepared her for the reality. Venice wasn't picturesque. It was alive, pulsing beneath its age, whispering secrets in the ripple of the canals. "This city doesn't belong to the past," Luca said beside her, his voice low, carrying over the hum of the engine. "It belongs to anyone clever enough to use its silence." Layla looked at him. "And who are we meeting here?" "An old friend." His lips curved faintly. "Or maybe an old rival. The distinction changes depending on the year." It was the kind of answer that both revealed and concealed, like everything else he told her. They disembarked near a quiet campo far from the tourist crowds. No souvenir stalls. No gondoliers singing for tips. Just weathered stone buildings leaning toward each other, their windows dark, their shutters closed. A man in a dark coat waited at the edge of the square, smoking. His face was hard to place, ageless, worn, unremarkable in a way that was deliberate. He greeted Luca with a nod, not a handshake. Inside, the man said in Italian. His accent was sharp, northern. They followed him into a narrow building that looked abandoned from the outside. Inside, it was a small, private cafe, empty tables, dusted chandeliers, the smell of strong coffee lingering like memory. They spoke in low tones. Italian, French, then back again. Layla caught fragments, names, places, numbers. A transfer. A ledger. A shipment that never arrived. She stayed quiet, her hands folded around a cup she didn't drink from, watching the tension flicker between them like static. After 20 minutes, Luca stood. "Enough." The man nodded. "Then you'd better watch your back." Back outside, the fog had thickened. It rolled across the canals in soft sheets, swallowing lantern light, blurring outlines of bridges and alleys. They boarded a gondola waiting near the quay. The gondolier was young, expressionless, his movements practiced. Luca guided Layla in first, then sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp, scanning the mist. For a while, it was almost peaceful. The water lapped against the boat's sides. The oar dipped rhythmically. They drifted past shuttered palazzas with stone lions guarding their doors, beneath low bridges that seemed too ancient to still stand. Layla let herself breathe, just once. Then she saw them. A shape in the fog. Another gondola. No lantern. Moving parallel. At first, she thought it coincidence. But then another appeared, sliding silently behind them. Her pulse quickened. "Luca. I see them." His voice was calm, almost too calm. The gondolier's rhythm quickened. The boat cut sharper through the water, turning down a side canal. But the others followed. Shadows in the mist. Silent. Unrelenting. Layla's breath caught as they glided beneath a low stone bridge, the fog so thick she could barely see Luca's face across from her. "This isn't random, is it?" she whispered. "No," he said. "It never is." The gondola jolted suddenly, rocking hard to the side. One of the pursuing boats had cut across their path, blocking the narrow canal. Layla's heart leapt into her throat. The gondolier hissed a curse in Venetian dialect, steering sharply to avoid collision. Water splashed over the edge, icy against her skin. Luca was already moving. "Out," he ordered, standing with effortless balance. "What? Now?" He reached across, gripped her hand, and pulled her up. Before she could protest, they leapt from the gondola onto the stone steps of a crumbling alleyway. The gondolier didn't wait, he pushed off again, vanishing into the fog. The sound of footsteps followed. More than one pair. Fast. Precise. They ran. The alleys twisted and narrowed, splitting and doubling back. The fog pressed close, swallowing sound, amplifying every echo. Layla's sandal slapped against wet stone as Luca led her through corridors barely wide enough for two. She could hear them behind, the faint rush of feet, the scrape of boots against centuries-old pavement. "Where are we going?" she gasped. "Somewhere they can't follow." He turned a sharp corner, guided her across a tiny bridge, then down a stairwell that disappeared beneath a palazzo. The air was colder here, damper, the walls slick with moss. They emerged into a silent canal, empty but for a single boat, smaller, low, covered with a dark tarp. Luca pulled it free with practiced ease, motioned for her to get in. Layla hesitated. "How do you have this waiting?" "Because I don't believe in accidents," he said. They pushed off into the fog. The water closed around them, the oar slicing silently. Behind them, the echoes faded. No footsteps. No shadows. For now. Layla sat, heart still racing, her hands trembling as she gripped the wooden edge of the boat. She looked at him, calm, steady, eyes trained on the mist ahead as if he could see through it. "This isn't a fantasy," she whispered, the words trembling out of her. "No," he agreed softly, not looking at her. "It never was." The silence hung heavy between them. And in that silence, Layla understood what she hadn't wanted to admit until now. She was part of it. Not by accident. Not by chance. By choice. Because she had followed him this far. And there was no way back. That's the end of this part, but trust me, the next one is even more thrilling. We drop fresh episodes every day, so don't miss out. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, you won't want to miss what's coming next.
Thanks for listening to Billionaire Romance Stories, where love meets luxury in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. We love hearing your favorite twists and favorite theories. And don't forget to ring that bell, because in this world of yachts, secrets, and luxurious romance, the next story is always one click away.